to order, and we appreciate everybody in attendance and all of those that are participating via a Zoom call or from their cell phone. As we do roll, if you're not in the room, please identify yourself and state if you're in your office or if you're in your district for us. At this time, I'd like to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Senator Carpenter, Senator Caslin, Senator Embry, Senator Harper Angel,
Present off campus.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Schickel, Senator Southworth, Senator Turner,
Here in the room.
Senator Webb, Senator Westerfield, Senator Wheeler, Representative Blanton,
Present in the room.
Representative Bowling,
Present in the room.
Representative Bridges.
Present in District 3.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Birch, Representative Cantrell, Representative Dossett.
Present from the 9th District.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Dotson,
Present in the room.
Representative Duplessis.
Here, but off campus.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Flannery.
Present in the 96th District.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Fugate.
Here in the room.
Representative Johnson.
Present in the 13th.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kirk McCormick. Representative Marzian.
Present off campus.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Miles. Representative Gibbons-Prunty.
Present in the room.
Representative Scott.
Present in District 41.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Stevenson. Representative Wesley.
Present in the room.
Representative White. Chair Smith.
Present in the room.
And Chair Gooch.
Present in the room.
Very good. We have a quorum. At this time, I would like to ask Representative Bill Wesley to lead us in prayer, if he would please.
Father, we just thank you today, God, for your goodness and mercy. How you would have us to pass judgment, God. That's for the commonwealth, for your people. Lord, we just thank you, God, for our leadership that's here.
Amen. Very good. And I hadn't had a chance to ask him in advance, but I wonder if Representative C.B. Embry would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. C.B., would you be willing to do that for us, sir? Oh, please stand and follow C.B.'s lead. Co-Chairman Gooch, do you have any comments as we start our initial meeting this morning?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to welcome everybody. We have a good attendance today, and I look forward to getting this interim starting. I know we'll have a lot of issues that we'll discuss. Most of them will probably be things that we will be dealing with in the next session, and that's why the interim process is so very important, that we get a chance to review and hear testimony from people out there that have interest in these subjects, and I always enjoy the interim, and I hope that you will as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to working with you again.
Very good, same here. And I also would like to give special recognition. I see our Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife and also a good friend of mine, Rich Storm. If you stand up, Rich, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to join our committee today, and it's good to see you here, sir. Very good. All right, let's get into our meeting. Do we have any members that wish to be recognized at this time? Senator Southwood.
Mr. Chairman, I just need to be recognized for attendance in the room.
All right, very good. And quickly, I know when I've had to do it at remote, I feel like I'm not sure if they hear me answer roll call. Is there anybody that's participating via Zoom that did not get a chance to answer roll call or is joining us late?
I am, Mr. Chair. This is Mackenzie Cantrell from House District 38 in Louisville.
Okay, do we have Mackenzie down represented? Okay, and anybody, I heard somebody else speak too. Just want to make sure we get everybody.
Suzanne Miles. I am present in the district.
All right, very good. All right, and again, just last chance, any members that have any quick comments before we get started? If not, let's proceed. You'll see at the table in front of us a group of distinguished guests are going to be addressing a very, very important issue. I will say that I cannot brag enough on the group of individuals that you gentlemen are looking at here at Natural Resources. You followed us on our journey for the last 5 years. We have really been plowing into blockchain, cybersecurity, a lot of the issues now that the country is dealing with. And this group right here was awake at the wheel. And it says a lot for a lot of the states simply got caught asleep as this hit. But this committee has done the majority of the heavy lifting for the state of Kentucky and several other states that we're kind of competing with to take the top spot as far as blockchain technology and other aspects of cryptocurrency and securities. But this group in front of you has probably been one of the most informed group of members of the Natural Resource Committee I think Chairman Gooch has ever served with. So you'll have some really good questions today. You'll find a group of people that are very informed and what you all are talking about. And in light of what we just saw with the breach with the oil line, I hate to say it, but we kind of told you so. And there's a tremendous group of individuals that work on this daily with the Governor's Office of Technology, which I participate on that group as well, that are trying to solve these issues and figure out what is the very, very best way for the state of Kentucky to maximize our security and limit our exposure. So that group works every day, every month with a meeting, and very, very impressed with them and the work they're doing. So you'll be hearing more about that. But what I'll do at this time is I'll turn it over to you gentlemen. Please identify yourself for our records, and the meeting's yours.
Now it's on. Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. My name's Steve Swick. I'm the Chief Security and Privacy Officer for American Electric Power, in turn, Kentucky Power.
I'm David McLeod. I'm the Director of IT Security and Risk Management for LG&E and Kentucky Utilities.
And I'm Keith Butler. I'm the Chief Security Officer for Duke Energy Corporation, and here on behalf of Duke Energy Kentucky.
All right, well, very good. Men, if you guys want to go ahead and choose among yourselves, since you've got a pretty good pool to pull from there, who would like to take the lead on it? We'll follow your direction.
I'll go ahead and start this off. Get this presented here. Okay. It should be up now. Okay, so the first thing we were going to start with was a little background on the pipeline event. So I don't know who you've gotten briefings from on the pipeline event, but we thought it might be a good idea to just give you a little background of what we know, which is not much different than what's in the public. We have not gotten a lot of insight from classified sources or other connections we do have. While we're well connected, we still don't have a lot of visibility into that. The pipeline event happened or the report started happening in May 8th on Saturday. That's when a lot of the media started talking a lot about it. There weren't a lot of statements from Colonial, but all the reporting, and still the reporting continues to be, it affected their corporate environment, their IT systems, not their operations systems that manage the pipeline. However, the reports we have, all secondhand through media and sources, is they disconnected the pipeline to protect it, which is a good practice, but they weren't able to quickly bring it back up. So the cyber compromise did not hit the operational, from everything we've heard, did not hit the operational piece of the pipeline. But, you know, it is possible it could have ventured in there. They shut it off, but, you know, anything's possible in the cyber world. Any questions on that initial event?
No, but I'll make a comment. I think that because this happened to a private corporation, it's been more difficult for us to get in and find out more than had it been a public utility. And so I'm not sure we will find out the full extent of what happened for a while, but I think that the fail-safe for it is shutting up the pipeline. So in my opinion, for them to go there, that means that was that's unplugging the fan, if you will, that they had to go and take that action, which tells me maybe they might have lost the ability of turning the speed up or down. So that was one of the most concerning things for me, is reading the report of how they went about solving it. And just like they use the analogy of a fan, if you can't get it to go on or off, you can unplug it as a last resort. But that tells me that some of the controls had simply failed or had been overridden. And I think that'll be which has been the chief concern for all of us, because this has happened to water, some other issues, and some petroleum issues in the public sector for people's utilities. And I'm not sure that it's going to go away, but I do feel like we have a very effective tool to help combat this. And that's hopefully what the takeaway here is, that, you know, we've been sort of yelling in a vacuum from this committee that this is very serious, and that the people of Kentucky and this nation deserve to have the best people on it and put everything, you know, forward to stop this from happening. But so I think there'll be more to come, but I do think it went farther than what we know, simply because of how they stopped it.
Senator, I know the three of us will be covering this in our testimony today, but one of the things is the distinction and the segmentation between your IT, your information technology, and your OT, your operation technology. So the power plants, the substations, that's your operating technology versus your information technology. What we believe at this point, and we don't have confirmation yet, is that their IT technology was jeopardized, and they proactively shut down their OT to prevent any adversarial impacts to their operations, so an adversary wouldn't get control of the operations and maybe do more harm. That's the belief right now, but the details are yet to be known.
Yep. And I will say a proactive step for utilities that are further advanced is they practice that. So in our case at AEP, if we suspect anything's in our system, internet gets disconnected immediately by my 24/7, 3 a.m., they can disconnect us from the internet. The next step is to disconnect, because we've got it segmented and we've tested it multiple times. So we know when it can come down, come back up, or the network can come down. It does not impact our transmission SCADA, for example. We've tested it. We know it works. So that's a unique thing without having all the details. But it is a proactive step we would take if it got nowhere near there, but that is not a common practice, I don't think. It's maybe a more advanced practice. I did include a slide about the dark side ransomware, which is really what targeted them. All reports are they're not really targeting energy today. And many cases might be finance and at least electric specifically have been leading the cybersecurity front for several years now, considered to be the more advanced industries. So that may be they're going for the easier game, right? That they're not going to come after the ones that there's a lot of protections, a lot of design that's been being designed for years. So that's some assumptions. As a background in American Electric Power, to give you an idea of how we get to do what we do in some cases, I am responsible for enterprise. So nuclear systems, operational systems, corporate IT systems, security of all those, and I have visibility end to end, which enables me, because we're centralized, I can have 100+ people, true cyber experts that we wouldn't be able to afford if we stood those up in every part of the country. And the collaboration and central visibility is very important to enable me to talk to my peers. I think I saw this, what are you seeing? Which we do on a regular basis. AEP does have a major network, the largest transmission network, which Kentucky is a major part of that. And we absolutely take all this seriously, and we get to leverage that capability. And we do have a private internal network of fiber. So our internet, for the most part, communicating between Kentucky, Ohio, Texas, is our own fiber. It's not on the public internet. So it's a luxury that I get to take advantage of doing what I do. I mentioned the organization, which I'm lucky to have this type of organization. I am responsible for cyber, physical security, privacy, and aviation. I'm 2 steps from the CEO. I brief the CEO and executive team monthly on whatever topics I think are interesting. Obviously, we talked about the Colonial Pipeline. I actually briefed them that day on what we knew, which wasn't a lot more than the public, but we do have that active communication at that level and that level of support. So Brett, the operating company president for Kentucky Power, I just talked to him yesterday about various cyber things that were happening, and he is on the initial communication that day. So trying to make sure our leaders are aware of everything that's happening, everything we know, whether it's a scary thing that we're worried about or something that hit the media that we need to make sure we're briefing everyone on and preparing if there is something that we can learn from it. I do have 155 pure cyber people. They're not doing IT support jobs at all. They're full on outside of that role. So it gives me a capability to develop a lot of more advanced capabilities. Like I have an internal penetration testing team that attempts to hack into our systems from internal to see if we're vulnerable or not. Not wondering if we're vulnerable. We're testing that on a regular basis, including into our substations. So it's being proactive and testing that stuff to the full level. This is a slide I created to talk to our board about how we manage the risk at AEP and throughout our operating companies. Really, we're very aggressive at proactive threat sharing across our industries and across sectors. So if we learn something that can help financial or healthcare or our peers, we're sharing anything we know, and then hopefully they can build on it if they're seeing anything. And this is stuff even that never gets in, that bounces outside, but it's an attempt from Russia that didn't make it in, but we still know that they're trying something. So we do share those very proactively. We have an annual white hat hackers that try to attack us from external. So we bring in somebody from a third party, not one of my people, and have them, in our case, we bring them inside, sit them at a desk and say, what can you get to? Because they haven't been able to get in from outside for several years. So we want to step up our game a little bit, right? NERC SIP is a cybersecurity specific regulation that has existed for years, focused on the electric sector only. There is discussion on whether this should be applied to the pipeline sector. It goes into detail on the protective measures, making sure there's a resiliency built in so that you can do the disconnects and things. So that it is a very thorough and sometimes a little too prescriptive, but a very prescriptive regulation that we have to comply with, and we get audited regularly on. AEP has already been audited twice already this year. And I am the NERC SIP senior manager, so it is a role over all NERC SIP functions at AEP. So I'm responsible for all of that, as well as enterprise security, so we make sure we're not just doing compliance, we're doing true security. We have maturity assessments done, which is a different type of assessment to see if our overall program versus the technical stopping a bad guy, the overall program and managing risk is well designed, if there's improvement areas, which a good assessment person always finds something in an area to improve. Otherwise, we need to find another assessment person that can find something, because there's always area to improve for everybody and everything. We partner with our internal audits and work with them on coordinating audits of our internal systems, and they actually facilitate the external penetration test. I don't control that engagement, our internal auditors do. So somebody that's a third party that really reports to the board of directors. And business unit relationships are critical for everything we do. If we don't have the trust of our generation, transmission, distribution systems, our operating companies, they're not gonna want to partner with us to manage the risk. And in a lot of things that I've talked about, they are the ones that requested. We have more requests for hacking, white hat hacking efforts, more requests than we can fulfill, because there's just so many, they want to test everything. And that type of partnership is a luxury, again, that we have, that is essential for success in security in a major corporation, much less a utility. this talks about our 24/7 Cyber Response Center. We actually stood this up in 2005. I actually came out of the Air Force in the 90s doing this, so we stood it up early. So in 2005, we stood up 24/7 AEP staffed cyber response capabilities, which includes all the monitoring of technologies. It includes processing intelligence that comes in, and within minutes, we can tell you if we saw that anywhere in our system. Whatever that detail was, we can look. The other pieces are proactive blocking. So at 3 a.m. on Easter Sunday, somebody can block something that potentially could be bad. If we find a hole or a new strain of a virus that's coming in, we can put those proactive blocks in without having to wake up organizations and stuff. These people are always there. They also process all the sharing that goes out to the electric sector, ISAC, to DHS, to FBI, the collaborative relationships we have. We're feeding them everything we have, so we're being transparent and letting them know, here's some things we think others should watch for that are unique in our industry. We haven't seen any intel on these. So it's getting that information out there. All that feeds the CEO briefing that I hold monthly with our executive team to let them know, here's the things I'm worried about. Here's some areas we're not doing well that we need support, funding, whatever, so they're as plugged in as they can be. We do match high frameworks that are guidance for best practices. NIST is one. I think Keith's going to talk a little bit about that, but there's several best practice frameworks that we try to align with all those, so we're making sure we don't have gaps and always looking, right? If there's curiosity on the pandemic, when we send everybody home, which AEP did across our enterprise, including my cyber teams that went home, they did not miss a beat connecting. We already had secure connectivity set up. When they connect to AEP, all other connections are dropped. It's not possible to connect to AEP and something else. They have to use a token to connect, a secure connection system like a VPN or a Citrix type virtual desktop type system.
Does AAP do they have their own VPN, or do you guys use just sort of a general marketed VPN?
No, I think all of us will have our own VPN
Have your own.
and our own private internet presence. So we have 2 at AEP that cover the enterprise, and then our own VPNs. And there are additional VPNs that often are inside, getting from segmentation, right? We don't allow internal people to get to the internal control system network. We make it very difficult. You can't just get here from there. In
And what
some
about
cases, there's
your employees' cell phones, executives. Do you run the same VPN on their devices as well, on computers, so you don't have a weak spot there? Very good.
For the computers, absolutely. For cell phones where they're just getting email, that comes through a filtered system, and we can shut those off at any point, the cell phone itself. So if it's connecting, it's gone. And it has, ours has antivirus software on the cell phones and things to give us capabilities to protect, just like we would a desktop, which is, that technology is still coming along. It's really early putting that stuff on cell phones, but we had the support to put it on because it has a little bit of extra overhead that people don't like, but it's necessary evil. So there's a lot of discussion on having people sent home. It did change the threat profile. We did see some of the threats change, but in our case, our profile didn't really change because everything is still coming from our corporate center. Even though people are at home, they're coming into that to go out. So it didn't necessarily increase the risk for us. The last one is, I think this is my last one, on the NERC standards. And this is just a list of them. As I mentioned, we get audited on these a regular basis. Some of us get audited several times a year by different regions because we're across the country. These things they bring in auditors, they ask questions, they make us provide evidence, they do walkthroughs on occasion. So this is a very thorough set of standards that have been in place since, I think the late 90s, 2002 maybe actually, something like that maybe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so early 2000s, these have been in place. So these have been evolving as we've been evolving to mature our security controls, mature our protections and capabilities. And it is, in the case of AEP, we actually have FERC and NERC are actually on site for the audits because they get a view of a lot across the country. So and sometimes DOE. So there's a lot of visibility on these things to make sure we have our game. We're critical to the infrastructure. I mean, that's part of our mission that we believe in, is we're protecting the U.S. I did it before in the Air Force. Now I'm doing it working for AEP. So it's a passion we do have. So it's something we take seriously. I think I've said that a couple times. But so are there any questions on this or things I can dive into, or we can hand it to one of my partners to walk through some of their discussion points, which we tried to touch different pieces to kind of give you a range of topics.
No, I feel like it's a good start. I don't see any questions at this moment, so if you guys want to go ahead and proceed on to the next speaker, but maybe at the end as we wrap up, there may be something that'll click where people have more questions. So please carry on.
Absolutely.
There we go. All right.
Share it on.
Oh, no. Thank you. 0.
Yep. Yep. And then, yeah, I think it'll be that one.
Let's see.
This is where you can expect.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thank you. Again, I'm David McLeod. I'm the Director of IT Security and Risk Management at LG&E and KU. So I have responsibility for cybersecurity for the company. I was going to discuss the LG&E and KU cybersecurity practices in the frame of some recent guidance that was given to our industry. This was a joint alert from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's the CISA, and then the FBI. It was issued in response to the Colonial Pipeline event that we discussed, so it was released last month, and it really gave best practices specific to critical infrastructure asset owners. And as you can see, this was the dark side ransomware related to Colonial Pipeline. The alert did provide really a set of recommendations from two different postures. One was actually how to prevent ransomware in an environment, and then the second was how to reduce the impact if you were to become a victim of ransomware. So I've paraphrased some of their recommendations and how LG&E and KU meet those on the next couple slides. So to begin, these are the recommendations for reducing the risk of ransomware attack. In general, these are good cybersecurity hygiene practices. The LG&E follows, but they were recommended in the alert as well. On one note, as we discussed, I think Keith mentioned the distinction between IT and OT. IT is information technology. That's going to be the more traditional systems, if you think company email systems and such. And then OT is operational technology, and that is going to be the technology that supports more operational functions, industrial control systems, or you may have heard the term SCADA. But if you think in our industry, we're talking about things that support like generation or transmission functions. So the first item that they recommended was really keeping your remote access secure, and that's to both IT and OT. As I believe Steve mentioned, the multi-factor authentication. So if you're going to be connecting remotely, it's having multiple factors, something you know, something you have, that type of thing. So securing remote access. The next theme from the recommendations was phishing. Phishing remains really the initial vector how the attackers are getting in. And so having a good phishing filter, an email filter on your systems, as well as educating your employees, having a good security awareness program.
If I could just stop you for a second. Tanya made a very good point. Some people may not be familiar with the term phishing.
Sure.
So if you want to elaborate on that, but that has also been a very effective tool, even though it's very outdated. Even with the term ransomware, with what we're seeing now, has changed from 2018 to now. It's a totally different game of who's doing it and what they want. But we were using sort of the reverse phishing to be able to track these people down right to the cafe and wherever they're at, they're sending this stuff. So the phishing works both ways for us, thankfully, right now. But if you would explain just generally for members that may not know.
Sure. And phishing is going to be emails that are crafted in an effort to get employees or users to click. And really, once they click, it can take them to a malicious website, or it can have a malicious file within the email. But it basically is the first foothold. It's a way to get through all of those protections by sending an email that looks like a legitimately sourced email in order to get someone to click. And really, once they click, that's kind of where things start and where they can get a foothold in an environment.
And so that's why members, when emails or you see anything, sort of make some sort of offer or a special 20% off. But what we found, even is up just to like yesterday, I saw a case where they had tracked down some individuals that had tried to do a ransom attack on a hospital software and had it narrowed down, and they sent them emails phishing for government grants. And sure enough, they were dumb enough to click on it. And those people probably got picked up about an hour and 45 minutes ago. So it works, it's effective, it's basic for what we're seeing. And I think that the purpose of what today is to bring us up to the threat that's more of the moment with us. But as you come to terms like that, for our members, if you would just do a quick breakdown of what it is for us, please.
Senator, if I could just add something on the phishing. That is probably the biggest risk today of cyber ransom attacks. One of the things we're seeing at Duke Energy is adversaries are breaching our vendors. They're getting into our vendor systems who don't have as strong as protections and controls, and then they send emails from those vendors to Duke Energy employees that appear to be very legitimate emails that our employees would expect to get. And so we're adding extra protection and warning our employees to, even if it appears to be a good email from a vendor, you need to look for clues in there.
And so, yeah, I think it's both having an email filter to try to catch those phishing emails before they actually make it to someone's email inbox, and also having a good security awareness program to train your employees to help spot those and to not click on them. And that was really what was recommended in the CISA alert is having those mock phishing exercises for your employees. Additional, just filtering network traffic. This is going to be typically done through what's called network firewalls. And there can be multiple layers of network firewalls, but being able to understand what's coming in and out of your company network. Patching is another just good cyber hygiene. That's keeping your software and applications up to date as vulnerabilities are released. Patching that software, so having a patch management program is important. Additional, as we talk about deeper in to the network, is limiting who has remote control access to other systems or servers, even inside a network. Another more traditional is antivirus and anti-malware. That's still important for protecting. Antivirus and anti-malware is the programs that if somebody does click that email, that they're the next line of defense really to help stop it from running, to catch it, to quarantine what we would call malicious code. And so good practices are to make sure that those programs stay up to date with the latest definitions and that you're conducting regular scans. And then the last item on their recommendation was hardening devices and company systems. And this can be really multifaceted, but in general, hardening is equated to kind of having purpose-built devices so that you're running what's designed to be run on them, but they're not as open to other services to be run or other applications that don't need to be on them. So the next set of recommendations from their alert was reducing the impact of ransomware. And really what this was about is if those attackers were able to get a foothold within a network, how can you reduce the impact or exposure? And so the first couple items within their recommendation was going back to IT and OT is having those networks segmented. So typically the information technology networks are more exposed to the internet. If you think of email systems, they really have to talk to the internet in order to get email. But the OT, what would be transmission or generation or what have you, doesn't necessarily need to talk. And so it's going to be a more protected network. So you want to have tighter controls between those two. And even between OT networks themselves, they don't need to be on the same network. There may be different criticality between a generation network and a transmission. So all of that will help if an attacker was able to get a foothold to prevent the overall exposure. Additionally, we touched on some alternative plans regarding specific to Colonial. It's important to have alternative plans for if you did need to sever that connection between IT and OT, to make sure that you know how to do it. And then even if you had to shut down that network, that you have manual controls in place so that if that network's unavailable, that you can switch over to manual and continue your operations. Backups, as we mentioned before, are critical. The backups need to be secure. If you had a ransomware impact and it started encrypting systems, you don't want the ransomware to also encrypt your backups. So you need to ensure that the backups are secure and also that you've tested your backups so that you know that the backups are successful and that you know how to use those backups and then if it comes out. And then the last item from their recommendations was around protecting privileged accounts. This is really around if you think of privileged accounts being administrator accounts. So you want to have additional controls around those accounts. If an attacker was able to get a hold of those, it would have a lot larger impact than if they got more of a least privileged employee type account. And then just a few other items I thought I'd mention specific for LG&E and KU that weren't in the CISA FBI alert. We do conduct tabletop exercises, and we do use ransomware as a potential scenario in those tabletop exercises. Those are very valuable, help us identify gaps, also exercise our team and our incident response if we had a ransomware event. Industry cyber information sharing, working with our peers, understanding what else is happening if others are impacted and able to use that information to guide our monitoring, guide our responses, and then evaluating our protections. And then the last item, as Steve mentioned, doing penetration exercises. We're using tools that hackers would typically tool, kind of their tactics and techniques. We're able to, test our defenses, see if we have any gaps, if we have any blind spots in monitoring. So continuing to try to exercise ourselves. And that was all I had.
Yeah, David, if I could ask you just, I think one of the things that is my concern is that a lot of the stuff that you and each of your companies are doing have a lot of moving parts, a lot of personnel. You're doing a lot of testing, you're doing a lot of monitoring. It's a lot of moving parts and pieces. And I'm always curious about if you guys were using blockchain to bring it down to that level, how that would make it easier for you all to make it much more difficult for a lot of the stuff you're running to worry about somebody hacking it. But in the last probably 48 hours since June the 1st, something very significant has happened. If you've got TikTok or Facebook, or if you have a Alexa or any device that's recording you, I don't know if you've seen the the warnings that your devices have given you. If you subtly just brushed it by, you probably shouldn't have. But you have, I guess, until June the 8th to be able to say, take me off of this system. But Alexa will now be a part of a greater network where they will be sharing and collecting not only anything it may see in your house as far as the back room, but a conversation. And so if you've got that on your phone, you tell Alexa to call my mom. It's
Mr. Chairman, if I can add to that or clarify, that's the Amazon Sidewalk network, as they
Right,
call
Sidewalk's
it.
the patch for it. So if you do Sidewalk, there's a patch for Sidewalk and Sidewalk 2. That's what they want you to follow to fix it as of today. But TikTok's got a whole nother one that's coming out that doesn't have Sidewalk. But go ahead, Senator Westerville.
Well, what's happening on June 8th is that Amazon has announced that it's using all of its hardware devices, if they're current enough, they're new enough. Maybe the first generation Alexa devices may be too old, but all of their other hardware devices that have a Wi-Fi connection or network or are connected to your home Wi-Fi are sharing that for other users to benefit from. It also expands their information network. They've just entered into an agreement with Tile, which makes little plastic devices that can track items. You can attach it to your keys or whatever else, and it broadens that network. But it's a huge privacy concern, and you're right to bring it up. I sent out a tweet a couple days ago when I read the news about what Amazon's done. In fact, they've made it automatically kick in for every Amazon hardware gadget that's out there that qualifies or that has enough internals to support doing this. It forces users to have to opt out. And so I encourage folks, if you're an Amazon household, to make sure to turn that off.
You have until the 8th. But it's not only that, TikTok as well today, if you look at the fine print. So here's the concern. You have all the firewalls, you have all this stuff, but what you can't stop is me being on my break in the bathroom on TikTok, and it's videoing you. Your phone takes a picture of your face every 5 seconds. And it does that for a lot of reasons. It says it's for better customer service or whatever. A lot of people don't know it does that. If you have an ISO device, but I can yell to my secretary and say, "What? You changed my password? What's my new password?" Well, it's listening to that, and that happens sometimes in our office because I'm working, and we have to change ours because that's our security measure here. And she may say, it's Brandon Smith at whatever, and I'm putting it in. Well, my phone has picked that up, but it also can pick up different pictures and perimeters inside of a building, hallways, security systems. So now I'm inside your operation at Duke Energy, and I bypassed your firewall. I bypassed all the stuff you put into place, and now I have access to discussions that executives are having. The VPN on my phone is not going to stop that because it's audio. And so all the stuff that we're talking about changed, and is going to be changing even further. And surprisingly, a lot of people won't catch that. They'll just say, I don't want to give up TikTok, and they'll just go ahead and swipe it, and that'll be some of your employees in some of the most sensitive places out there. So the threat that we had as of really yesterday, when the clock started ticking, has completely changed for all the work that you men have dedicated so much skill and stuff to. So the threat is coming at us at a very different rate and a very different aspect of a way that is going to be incumbent on a lot of people to figure out how do we stop that, because it's not going to stop. They're going to keep seeing more and more of this. But just to put that out there with what you're seeing with just these three companies, that now we're going to use your device to not only pick up audio and send it into this central server as pictures so it can identify what room of the house you're in. They're saying so if you're in the laundry room, it takes enough pictures while you're moving around, it assesses that I know where your laundry room is. And if I don't see a certain product in there, or if I see Tide in there, that's how they want to sell it to you. It's to help you. It's to make your life easier. But then I know that there's other things in there. I'm in your garage. I see what cars you drive. I'm in your kitchen. I'm in your kids' room. At the point you get to, but when you move it over to utilities and securities and other aspects of what we do, it becomes very much more dangerous at a level we've never seen before. So I'll turn it back over to you all to see if you want to respond to that.
And I'll talk a little bit about the education we do for our employees, but we put out regular security briefings to our employees on not just company-related, but all on social media accounts and things that they should be doing with their personal devices, with their home devices. And I will tell you exactly what you're talking about is why I will not have any of those type Amazon or Alexa devices at my house.
Yeah, absolutely. To support what Keith said, this is a new set of challenges, and sometimes it's protecting users from themselves. They're not intending to be malicious in most cases. They're actually doing things they don't know is a risk. They're introducing risk. So it's the new twist, which is why our job's exciting. The new challenging twist, where there isn't an easy answer, we'll have to figure it out, is the one you just described, which we'll be on. That's why we have good teams that we can rely on to dig into this, partner with DHS, partner with FBI, and use all our resources to figure out the best way to control these risks and manage them, right? So
I read the contract this morning, and I noticed that California, of all the things you have to tout California from, but apparently the citizens in California that live there are protected from this. I found that fascinating, because you'd go through this, and it's not a lot of fun to sit down and read one of these agreements, but you should. But it gets down to sharing third party, what they can do inside your house. They have to get special permission to do that, and for people in California. So, Kentucky should be no different, gang. That we should be thinking about the people that we represent, and whether or not Kentucky needs to get involved to have a specific law to say, as you're going down through this, if you do this in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, that you have to have special permission to protect families out there. Because you're seeing more and more and more. There's a whole section of kids under the age of 13. You would be surprised on the applications like TikTok, how many young girls on there prancing around in bathing suits and stuff like that, and who's sharing that information? How many 43-year-old men need to be looking at a 13-year-old girl? There's a lot of issues here, and who should be sharing that information? So Kentucky needs to take this very serious about letting these particular groups know that not in Kentucky. So there's a lot of challenges for all of us. Security is another aspect. Our job is to protect the citizens, and you're also make sure that people's air conditioners work and the hospitals have power and things like that, all both very important. But it's going to take a collaborative effort to try to prevent what's coming.
The California Consumer Privacy Laws, CCPA, is the most aggressive in the country. You have to, a California citizen automatically gets that protection. New York is putting in place similar laws, and I think there's about 5 or 6 other states that are looking at that right now. In my previous role prior to becoming Chief Security Officer, I was the Chief Risk Officer for the company, and privacy fell under risk along with ethics and compliance, which I was acting Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. We had to look across all the different states where we do business, or we have employees, or we have shareholders, and make sure we're compliant with those laws.
Well, just to follow up for the members here, if you're interested in co-sponsoring with me a piece of legislation to do just this, please let Tanya know, and we'll put your name on it, include you in a working group to make sure that people in Kentucky are prevented from what's getting ready to come. So be sure if you want to be included in that to let us know.
Do you want to just pull up my slides? Because I'm not sure. I'm going to take a little different twist. I'm not using slide by slides. I have 4 slides that I'll reference, but I'm going to go through my testimony. Please stop me at any point in time. As I said earlier, I'm Keith Butler, Chief Security Officer for Duke Energy. I have responsibility and oversight for the enterprise-wide security program. It encompasses cybersecurity, physical security, threat management, threat intelligence, executive protection, and the NERC SIP program for our regulated businesses in 7 states. Our commercial businesses, our commercial renewable business also has to comply with NERC SIP. And then likely our corporate functions, are several areas in our IT functions have to comply with NERC SIP also. I've been with Duke Energy 37 and a half years. I know the industry well. I know the company well. Today, I'm representing Duke Energy Kentucky, and I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this. You know, Duke Energy is an essential service provider. You've said that. You recognize that. We're one of the largest grid operators in the United States, and so protecting our assets, remains a top priority for Duke Energy. We realize that threats are evolving every day, and we work diligently to stay apprised of the tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTP, and you'll hear that phrase as you think about adversaries, TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And there's no denying that security is a critical issue that's facing our industry and our nation. Threats we see every day continuing to increase in frequency and sophistication. The Irish health system, the Colonial Pipeline, JBS Food, the New York Transit Authority just announced that they were hacked back in April, and they just announced that yesterday. And then the ferry that serves Nantucket and Cape Cod also had an IT cyber attack on them. So at Duke Energy, we have an unwavering commitment to advancing our security, and we recognize our job is never done. We're planning for not if, but when we have a cyber attack, and that's an important thing to understand. Not if we have a cyber attack, we will have a cyber attack. And so I'll talk a little bit later about what do you do when we have one, and that's part of the NIST framework that I'll refer to. So as we said, it's important to be able to respond 24/7, 365, and that's important in our business because we are critical infrastructure. So at Duke Energy, we continue to strengthen our cyber defense tools and processes, including the implementation of advanced security measures for the operational technology, the OT, in our substations, our power plants, and the grid modernization that we're doing today. That's an important part of our go-forward strategy, is to modernize our grid, but with that comes risk too. The electric, the nuclear power, and the natural gas sectors adhere to mandatory regulations, as well as enforceable cybersecurity standards and voluntary guidelines too. As we talked about earlier, and my colleagues talked about, one of the key requirements we have on the businesses are the NERC SIP requirements. And we have a formal program underneath my area of responsibility called SIP Program Management, CIP, Critical Infrastructure Protection. And so I have a dedicated group of individuals who are focused on this SIP protection under the NERC SIP guidelines, and it's an enterprise-level team for all of our jurisdictions, including Duke Energy Kentucky, and they own, they create, and they maintain policy that sets the expectations for sustainable security management controls and accountability for adherence to that program to protect the bulk electric system. Our SIP management program ensures alignment and consistent implementation on an enterprise-wide basis to comply with those NERC SIP standards that are constantly being updated and changed. But we go beyond just those NERC SIP standards, and we go beyond that of what is required to make sure we're adequately prepared to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those are the 5 elements of the NIST framework, and I'm going to walk through those right now for you. The first element is to identify. This involves developing the organizational understanding across the entire enterprise of how to manage cybersecurity risk to systems, assets, data, and capabilities. This is where we identify our critical assets. So this is where a company identifies what maybe you've heard of the crown jewels. These are your most critical assets to the operations of the company, whether that be on the IT or the OT side. This is where we do threat assessments and we do intelligence gathering. We have internal, third-party, and no-notice penetration tests. So my colleagues talked about those penetration tests. We have internal folks that do that, as well as we hire external, and our employees don't even know it's coming. So we want to be surprised by it. We don't want to know about it.
Keith, can I ask you a question? And your
Yes, sir.
group you're talking about, does your fuel stock or your feedstock, is that included in your stuff that you manage to watch in the sense of whether it was solar, wind, or coal as far as disruptions or, you know, bridges being out or taken out to slow your all's ability to have, or gas pipes in
Yep.
there? Is that all part of the stuff you watch as well?
We have a threat intelligence team that is monitoring all our service territories and looking for any kind of protest or any kind of disruption. Even during the during the insurrection that happened at the Capitol, we learned of threats that there might be attacks on data centers, for instance, Facebook, Amazon, other data centers. We have some of those in our territory. We stepped up special protection. We did flyovers with our helicopters to see if we could see any type of activity that might be a threat to those, to make sure that not only our systems were protected, but those critical systems of our customers were being protected too. Great question. So the second element in the NIST framework is protect. And protect involves developing and implementing appropriate safeguards to ensure delivery of critical infrastructure services. And this component includes internet network protection, intrusion protection on substations, critical transmission infrastructure, and our IT systems, so both electronic as well as physical, and support processes and procedures for data protection at rest, so when data is just sitting there, data that's in use, and data that is in transit electronically, and as well as protection against data loss too, which is a risk for us. The third element of the NIST framework is detect. This involves developing and implementing appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. You want to know if one is happening. And Duke Energy is dedicated to having very strong and sound information and intelligence sharing avenues. Was there a question? Or? Okay. We coordinate frequently with our FBI offices in all our jurisdictions, but in particular where our headquarters is in Charlotte, North Carolina, we have a very strong relationship with our FBI office and talk to them regularly, including unclassified and classified briefings. We also share with the industry through the ISACs, and the electric industry is called the EISAC, Electric Information Sharing Analysis. While we have these strong relationships, it's also important that we invest in the tools and technologies to protect. And so those are intrusion detection and monitoring systems, both electronic and physical, as well as vulnerability detection management tools that our analysts, and we have a whole team of analysts that are studying these on a regular basis, the information we get from that. So I've been through identify, protect, and detect. Now what happens if an event actually happens? The not if, but when. And this is respond. So respond involves developing and implementing the appropriate activities to take in the event that you have a detected cyber event. We have a 24/7, 365 Cyber Operations Center, just as our colleagues have, and it's known as our CSOC, Cybersecurity Operations Center. We're in the process of expanding that right now to our OT technology, our operating technology, and that's going to be called our OT SOC, 24/7, 365. It will be staffed. And we're focused predominantly on the cybersecurity protection of our systems, but I have an entire staff of folks focused on physical security, and they're also 24/7, 365, and we have an enterprise security operations center that is focused purely on physical security. At any time, one of our employees can call that 24/7 and get a person to be able to respond to any type of concern that they have. I'd also like to underscore the importance of conducting incident response drills. These drills and exercises are regularly conducted on a broad range of scenarios, include both internal and external partners. Duke Energy, again, will participate. If we could go to 2 slides, I believe. One more. The Grid X exercise. Duke Energy is going to participate in this, and I imagine AEP and LG&E will too. This is a nationwide exercise sponsored by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or known as NERC. And this is an exercise that each individual utility can design on their own, but is also a nationwide utility, including our Canadian utilities participate in this, to stress test situations. And the last one really focused on cybersecurity attacks and pushed the edge on cybersecurity, where there were multiple attacks happening to multiple utilities, which could have jeopardized the entire nation's grid. And so those are the exercises. We man that. We have our incident management centers in full operation at the time. We activated our crisis management team, which are our top executives, and we go through this drill as if it's really happening, so we understand what's going on and how to react from that. Then I'll talk about recover. Recover involves developing and implementing appropriate activities to maintain plans for resilience and restoration. To ensure its readiness to recover, Duke Energy conducts regular backup and restoration processes for all of our critical information systems. Remember, I talked about identifying those crown jewels? We make sure we have our crown jewels backed up with information and protection, and we drill that regularly. It's important for us to keep that muscle memory, just like you do in a sports with tennis. You want that muscle memory when you're playing tennis. We want to have that in cybersecurity, in recovery, and response. So I've explained the different processes and through the elements of the NIST framework, but I also want to say we just don't rely on these at Duke Energy. We also have a concept that's called defense in depth, and that's used to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the network and the data that is within our network. And defense in depth takes many forms, and I'm going to highlight a few of those. Remote access. I think that was a question that this committee had about remote access. It's a high-risk element to protect against. And Duke Energy does not allow remote access to any functions that control our power grid. That's an important point. We do not allow remote access to any functions that control our power grid. All control networks are segmented and isolated from non-control networks. So networks that control the power grid are segmented from networks that do not control the power grid. That OT-IT segmentation that we talked about earlier, that could have been a risk with the Colonial Pipeline. This greatly reduces the risk of the adversary, the bad person, gaining access to the system, as well as for potential of negative impacts to the system if an intrusion were to occur. So we do have some grid performance data that is permitted to flow to key partners and manufacturers of grid equipment, so we can work just like sometimes when your iPhone says, do you want to send analytics to Apple? Well, we have some of that and we allow that, but what's important is it's allowed on an outbound basis only, not a two-way communication with these. So they cannot come in electronically. We can only send information out. These connections do not originate at the control level either. Remember, I talked about the distinction between the control and the non-control level. These are not at the control level. They're outbound only design, And along with the point of origin outside of the control network, it provides protection such that a successful intrusion or attack would be highly unlikely. Additionally, as I previously mentioned, we're in the process of implementing that 24/7, 365 OT SOC that will give us the ability to react quickly if we ever do detect an intrusion into our operating system. So as I said earlier in my testimony, Duke Energy limits any type of remote access to our systems, but we also prohibit the crossover of networks and credentials between the IT and the OT. And that's that clean segmentation between IT and OT. If you could go to my last slide, slide 4, please. And I'm not going to go through this, but this is showing the different aspects of the OT environment. And what you need to do is how we're probing traffic. We want our employees to understand what good is. We establish baselines, and then we monitor for any anomalies outside those baselines, and then always the ability to take action to respond and recover. So the other question was about addressing the risk, and more specifically the risk of a ransomware cyber attack. And we use risk-based models. And as I said, prior to this job, I was Duke Energy's Chief Risk Officer and Chief Acting Ethics and Compliance Officer. And so I was overseeing the risk and working closely with cyber on the risk work. And we do these risk models to determine potential impacts to our systems that could cause a disruption in service to the critical national defense, to public critical infrastructure, all these are defined terms, governmental essential services, and then just to our general customer base. So risk assessments are an imperative component of our overall enterprise risk framework that we have at Duke Energy that is much more than just cyber. So we leverage a lot of standards and frameworks to do that. You heard about the NIST framework. There's multiple others that we use in this risk analysis. So we also have a protective and consistent partner in both the information with the FBI and the EISAC, as I mentioned earlier. And we partner with federal, state, and local agencies in sharing information with EEI, which is our industry trade group, with NARUC, who many of you may be familiar with, as well as with Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Energy, and several of us are going up next week to meet with the Department of Energy and talk about the industrial control systems, the systems that are over operating our plants to make sure we have good cyber protection and are working with the Department of Energy on those. That is associated with what you might have heard of the White House 100-day plan. And this was a sprint-type effort by the White House to focus on these industrial control systems and the risk of cyber attacks. And all these utilities are participating in that. So lastly, let me just touch on a couple of aspects of lessons learned and what we do with that. And not only do we ensure and implement a lessons learned approach and corrective action after every major event at Duke Energy, but we drill those exercises, we have plans and processes in place. And after each event, we do a lessons learned, we have our actions items, and we track those through to make sure they're fully implemented. Lastly, one of our strengths of our enterprise security team is taking those lessons learned and translating them into awareness products. We have a security awareness program that my team runs, and it's focused on creating stronger security culture throughout our enterprise. We conduct regular training on NERC SIP, on physical and cybersecurity threats. We use programs nationally like the Security Awareness Program, National Preparedness Awareness Month, which is the month of September, and National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is the month of October. And we have intense programs with all our employees, both on their company security and their personal security, some of what you mentioned, Senator Smith. And then we have enterprise-wide channels to remind employees of their important role. And it is up to the employees, because we said one of the biggest threats are those phishing emails, and we have to have our employees stop clicking on those potential malicious links in those emails. So, as you well know, the utility industry has an intense focus on safety. And what we're doing within Duke Energy is taking that same intense focus on safety, and we're translating that to an intense focus on cybersecurity. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share these today. I know I got into a lot of details, but please ask any questions about anything I spoke about.
We have a few, and thank you for your
Yep.
presentation. I read a lot of the stuff that Duke puts out. I find them as information. You've got some very talented people on your staff there. So Representative Dossett is first. So Representative Dossett, if you're there, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do want to say thank you for bringing this issue before the committee in such a timely fashion. Mine will be as much a comment rather than a question. I want to thank the presenters for coming before us, sharing this information. And it's important that that you shared with us that you are sharing what security risks that you have discovered and sharing those with other entities. I would like to ask them, the presenters, please feel free to reach out to us, the members of the General Assembly, and share with us what we may be able to do to help in any way. We've have experienced this here within the state with the breach within the unemployment system. So we need to be aware of what we can do to help. And Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to be a part and helping you with what you're working on there as far as limiting access to our citizens' information. So I would be happy to do that. To hear the issue come up on phishing, it's something that my wife mentioned to me today, that she had received a phone call from Amazon stating that we had a very high charge on our account, which we both knew that it was a phishing excursion that was coming out. And we're seeing so many of our citizens have this issue where they're experiencing it on a daily basis. And I did want to share with the cyber attack on our food network there with our food processors. I have asked the director of ag policy next week with the my committee there with tobacco settlement oversight, whenever they come in and do their presentation, also there from the Department of Agriculture, to share with us where we're at as far as security within our food industry, because whenever you start seeing, whether it be within our energy production, electricity production, or our food here across the state or across the entire nation, all these things are vulnerable right now. And as I said, I'm very happy that, Mr. Chairman, that you have brought this issue to the forefront here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Representative Givens-Prunty. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo what Representative Dossett said about let us know what we need to do, because I did try to read this report, and whatever we can do, let us know. But I have a question. I want to know your all's opinion. I have a young constituent who's in Purdue University who's studying cybersecurity. And he said to me, why don't you make it outlaw paying ransom for the ransomware in Kentucky? And then when I did some research, it's like, well, you'd stop companies from coming and all that. But I also learned that it's already on the federal books, but they're not enforcing it. What's your all's opinion on that?
So the FBI discourages the payment of any kind of ransomware. They also have a list, and it's called the OFAC list, and it is a list of terrorist organizations that it would be a felony if a company or an individual paid ransomware to any organization on that OFAC list. So I can't speak to Whether a company should or should not pay ransomware, I think it's dependent upon the situation. I think there's a lot of risk. As you read publicly with the Colonial Pipeline, ransomware was paid, the encryption key was sent, the encryption key did not work. So the FBI discourages that. What I would say is organizations like us will always be working with the FBI and other federal agencies if we have a ransomware cyber attack, and it's going to be a gut call, so I can't say whether we would pay or whether we would not pay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good question. Next, we have Representative Dodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of my curiosity, and I may be the only one here that maybe even thought about this, I don't know, but just for myself, first of all, I'd just like to say this is a very timely topic, and I appreciate you guys bringing it to us. But in the case of a major security breach, what processes are in place that bring in the FBI, DHS that come in? Do they bring their own forensic IT people, or do they have their own separate independent system for cyber forensics?
So I think all of us have, I have a full forensics team, trained, qualified. We also have forensic FBI forensic agents that have badges to my cyber operations center.
Gotcha.
And it's more for a backup, right? So
Right.
you're not going to want to hear AEP did the investigation, we're good, don't worry about it, right? You're going to want to hear FBI, it was standing there and they validated. Or we bring in some third party to validate because you're, you know, I'm not a company that we don't specialize in that.
So
even
on
though
that-
I'd have a very talented
So
team.
on that note, FBI, DHS, they have access to you to come in at any point, just kind of
Yep.
check on things. Okay.
Yep, and absolutely. And at the levels we operate, we're in regular contact, and if we weren't, they would reach out to us because they're worried about the country also, and we're critical to that, and we believe that too. We want to help.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I would just add, yeah, we don't go so far that they have badges today, but we work closely with our external partners, and there's a request for technical assistance that you actually file with DHS that we've already worked through with them. And the only other thing I'd add is there are some mandatory reportable that go to them also. So even the TSA recently made a mandatory reporting function if an incident occurred.
Very good question. Next, we have Senator Southworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. Our first presenter mentioned talking about protecting the country, and we just mentioned it again. And I'm wondering on a smaller scale, because obviously you all are at the country level, and I'm thinking as far as like a local government level, for example, you know, a county clerk trying to run an election. How do we don't have 155 cyber experts 24/7, 365. Are there ways that that are possible to not have a 24/7, 365 team and still maintain actual security? Any thoughts on that?
I'll jump out first. So one thing that I think you all should realize is the people, you probably have cyber experts that live in your community, want to protect the community, and would probably be willing to help advise, contribute at some level. They probably won't be able to be the monitor people, but they may be able to be called on if your IT staff reviews and sees something that looks scary. There's people they could consult with. I mean, I would be happy if my local community called me and said, can you look at this? The sheriff's department just had a potential hack. Can you pop over here and check? I want to protect my sheriff's department, my voting registration, all that stuff. So that would be one recommendation I have is to leverage some of the experts that are in your community that want to help protect your community. Because I think we all believe we want to take care of the U.S., which is from local to national, right? So that's one idea.
Is that the end of your question, Senator?
I think he was leaning into the microphone, so I'll hear that.
We have to have 24/7, 365 because we offer a 24/7, 365 service. A local election board, I would say they need to step up their security during election processes. Before and after, there's security consultants that they can bring on that can provide basic recommendations and protections that would help them. But I don't think a local election board would need a 24/7, 365 type protection. They might need that during an election period or leading up to or afterwards, but not all the time.
So like a 24/7 30 or something like that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and our last question, Senator Westerfield, and I'd be interested to hear his comments. He's been one of our certainly most astute members of this committee and very thoughtful on this issue. So I'll yield to Senator Westerfield.
Chairman, thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry, got a couple of dings here all at the same time. First, I appreciate you putting this topic on the agenda. And as others have said, this is a very timely conversation, but it's something we need to be much more aware of, more familiar with on an ongoing basis, because these sorts of incidents aren't going away. And the human factor, or the human part of the equation with regard to cybersecurity is almost always going to be the weakest point. I had a question that I wanted to speak briefly and share a thought or two. But my question is, particularly for the Duke and the LG&E folks, if I'm just curious, to the extent you feel comfortable answering, do you all have protections or protocols that protect any of your Internet of Things devices, things that are not computers necessarily, that humans interact with, like a laptop or a desktop machine, but thermostats, HVAC units, copiers and printers, other devices like that on your systems and networks? Are you all protected against that? I say, and I ask the question because some of the biggest hacks or vulnerabilities that have been found have been because of IoT devices that were horribly unprotected, that were set to use factory spec passwords and the like, but were installed in very expensive and elaborate factories and businesses.
So I appreciate the question. In terms of printers in our corporate environment, they're hooked up to our network with all the proper firewalls and protections. When we went remote with COVID, we would not let employees use home printers for a number of reasons. One is you're printing confidential information at home and then it's sitting at home. We did start allowing certain use of printers, but they could not be Bluetooth printers because of the risk of an interception. There's a lot of other protections that we have in place that, unfortunately, in a public forum like this, I can't go through in detail.
And I don't want you to. Obviously, there are lots of things you know and could share, but should not ever share publicly, and I completely understand that.
We have protections on smart meters. Again, I can't go into the detail of that. Electric charging stations are another one that we're putting protections on those, and I'll limit it to that. But yes, all those type of devices, as we're modernizing our grid, as we're putting additional offerings out there, we're ensuring that we have the adequate protection. So, David?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I think the one thing, I mean, kind of calling back to some of my good cyber hygiene is that network segmentation. I mean, we would rely a lot on that for those IoT devices. We kind of call those unmanaged devices because they're not necessarily falling into a lot of our cyber controls and necessarily all of our patching processes and things like that. So try to have other mitigations for those unmanaged devices.
I appreciate both of your responses on that. And I'm pleased to hear that there are some controls in place, whether it's by isolation or by actively managing those devices, because that's a place where a lot of particularly households don't have adequate protections at all. It also makes the thing that Chairman and I mentioned earlier regarding Amazon's announcement for their sidewalk network and what they're doing, it makes it that much more alarming. And I worry about the susceptibility of people's home networks to other nefarious traffic. I want to put all this in context, though. This is a problem, obviously, that's not going away. And as we continue to expand our digital presence and livelihoods and the amount of data, which is truly, I believe, incalculable, that we share and provide, not just to critical infrastructure providers like yourselves, but with every other thing that we use and live and deal with online. This is becoming an increasing risk and a problem for Kentucky citizens of all ages, young and old and in between. The 2021 Verizon data breach investigation report, I may have gotten that name wrong, but they looked at 29,200 some odd separate incidents. And from that, they discovered, and these are just the ones that they're aware of, 5,200 or so distinct data breaches. And there's a lot of Kentuckians' information involved in those breaches. I suspect it touches every member of this committee, directly or within 1 degree of separation of this committee, of every member on it. And that number is not ever going to get smaller. And I think it's important not just that we take action to address what sort of conduct is already there, but I wholeheartedly believe that Kentucky's law is insufficient, particularly with regard to consumer privacy. We have taken some steps, as the chairman knows, and others are aware. We've done some things to protect critical infrastructure, defining it and adding facilities to it in the last several years. But we're not doing nearly enough for consumer privacy and cybersecurity concerns regarding that. And I shared this in a committee presentation. I've shared it twice now. Once was back during session in front of Chairman Schroeder's Economic Development Committee. And it was for information only, but I talked about this 2019 piece from the Dallas Morning News, and they were referring to a company called Live Mobile Insights. And because of the information that people agreed to share on their smartphones or iPads or whatever, and that's an important point, but they agreed to share location information with this app or with that app or whatever. And they did that without reading privacy policies and being cognizant of just where that data is going. The long story short, this company was able to identify where Chick-fil-A customers would go on Sundays. People wanted to know where all these people were spending their dine out money when their favorite chicken place was shut down on Sunday. And Kentuckians won't be surprised to know that Cracker Barrel was the winner here. And I've got the link to that Dallas Morning News piece. I'm happy to share it with members. But all of that's being shared, and with no opportunity for the user to have knowledge and give informed consent to that kind of tracking that's going on. There's a whole lot of work that we need to do to improve and protect Kentuckians. I don't have a problem with the data economy that exists. I have a problem with it being used to our detriment and without our knowledge and informed consent. So I appreciate the presentation. Chairman, thanks for letting me rant a little bit here at the end.
Very good. Appreciate the input. Gentlemen, thank you all. I know that we could have probably, each one of you could have taken the full hour and a few minutes that we have going through some of the stuff that you're working on. But I think the takeaway is that you've got a committee here through Natural Resources that's put a lot of time and effort into it. The hardest thing about getting this topic is trying to get people to first off understand it or be interested in it. And as soon as you start talking over somebody's head, they just tune out. Well, if you notice, most of the members stayed because we have a great interest in this. This committee, above, I think, all, realizes the significance and appreciation for what you do and what's coming. And I applaud this committee. It's probably, like I said, the best natural resource committee we've had in Kentucky. So you'll have a lot of buy-in for us. Please keep us in the loop as you all move forward with some of the stuff we've talked about. We'll probably most definitely have you back in front of this committee, as we've got some challenges in front of us that we'll be working on over the summer. And with that, thank each of you. To the members now, I speak directly to you. If you look at your agenda, you'll see on reference 3, there's no action taken on this. It just has to be put on our agenda, but take a look at that so you at least know what we put on here in order for it to take effect. We do have one other person, Linda Birdwell, the executive director of PSC. Are you still with us, Linda? I don't want to cut you off. Hey, there you are.
I am. Let's see. Can you hear me?
We can, and we can see you as well. I just wanted to give you a couple minutes. I appreciate you sitting in desk.
Absolutely. I don't know that, and I appreciate, I really don't know that we have a whole lot to add. I think the bulk of the presentation was what you heard from the utilities. I did want to give you an idea that utilities are obligated under KRS Chapter 278 to provide adequate service and only charge reasonable rates. So cybersecurity impacts both service and rate jurisdiction, and that's where the PSC comes in. Obviously, the investments and costs necessary are passed through rates to customers, and maintaining adequate cybersecurity is a critical component to ensure reliable service. Further, should utilities fail to safeguard critical infrastructure, they do run the risk of requirements, fines, or sanctions from the PSC as a result of their missteps. So just to give you an idea, we do regulate about 1,100 utilities, but relative to the topic today, we regulate 19 electric distribution cooperatives, 2 generation and transmission cooperatives, and then 4 investor-owned electric utilities. And obviously you heard from 3 of our regulated utilities today. The PSC has been proactive in regard to oversight of cybersecurity, in addition to the federal oversight that occurs. And so as you heard the presenters talk about the NERC SIP, or the North American Electric Reliability Corporation critical infrastructure protection, that's what protects the bulk electric system, and they are required to comply with that. So at the Kentucky Public Service Commission, our role started as part of a docket in July 2013, where we require all of the parties in the case, and that was all of our jurisdictional electrical utilities and the 5 largest gas utilities, that they had to address matters concerning cybersecurity. So that was, they were required to develop internal procedures and address cybersecurity procedures. Given the sensitivity, the utilities are allowed to keep all of their procedures confidential, and they are required to certify that they have such procedures in place. So the commission, including the commissioners, has periodic meetings with each of the utilities individually for the purpose of receiving their updates, just like the presentation that you heard today. The commission does not require any filings because of, again, the release of the documents would jeopardize what we're trying to protect. The electric distribution cooperatives do not follow the NERC SIP standards. And so just to give you a background, NARUC, which is the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, provided a grant in 2013, and they had a third-party review of all of the co-ops and the cybersecurity standards, the risks, and what protections that each co-op had in place. The final report offered a focus assessment and a general guidance for those co-ops to also work on their cybersecurity. So in addition to those practices, we are a big part of NARUC. Commissioner Matthews is on the NARUC Critical Infrastructure Committee. PSC staff participates in the Critical Infrastructure Committee. This allows the PSC to stay current on the best practices and trends, in addition to communicating with our partner utilities. And obviously the most important piece out of this is communication. And communication is recognized as the first step to addressing any vulnerabilities with the cybersecurity issues. I don't want to take any more of the committee's time. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, but I think you really heard the bulk of what you all needed to hear, probably with the first 3 presenters. So,
Well, very good. Thank you for being with us today. For members, you hear NERC, FERC, MISO, all these different ones out there. If you ever have any questions, acronyms are, please contact me. We'll sit down and walk you through it, because you're going to be hearing a lot of that on this committee, as it affects so much of what Kentucky does and our utilities. Chairman Gooch is going to close us out here, but thanks for the attendance today, for everybody that joined us either in person or via remote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for having this discussion, on the agenda. And obviously, I always learn a lot of things, and I think sometimes committee meetings are good when maybe you rethink some of your own ideas. And I've always been one that felt like that. Anything California does, we should do 180 degrees completely opposite. But obviously, with today, we found that we might want to look at something that they do to protect our citizens and their privacy. So that does show that even a small ray of light can escape from the darkest black hole in the universe. And so with that, I stand corrected. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, all those in favor to adjourn at the sign of aye, we stand adjourned.